and I am a digital strategist at ProfileTree. So I help people work with their social media, the SEO on their websites, content marketing, digital strategy, all the fun things to do with essentially a digital presence.
Hi, so I'm Khadija, and I'm also a digital strategist at ProfileTree, and I will focus also more over on the website side of things. So I help a lot of clients sort of figure out how to optimize the website in terms of user experience, maybe some on-page SEO and things like that, really.
I'm Amy. I am a web specialist here at ProfileTree, and I do web development primarily with like WordPress websites, but a few other things as well.
Today, we're going to basically have a little bit of a chat about, I suppose, SEO in general, but we're going to focus a little bit about that kind of unique combination of user experience on a website combined with on-page content, and that focus on SEO and why it's so important to sort of find that balance. And we're going to explore that from the different perspectives of both the technical and then also user experience, and then the on-page SEO and keyword optimization as well. I suppose the reason that it's important for people or for us to have this conversation is because we're seeing, as always, everything in marketing really quickly change and evolve, and especially AI integration now, we're seeing a lot of shift and change in search engines and Google generative search as well. In terms of just, the landscape of websites, have either of you guys noticed a big shift or a big change over the last kind of 6 months in terms of SEO, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, I think people are certainly becoming a lot more aware of it. I've noticed when talking with clients and stuff, people are a lot more in tune than they may have been maybe a year or two ago with it, which is good to see. And it's interesting to see, how people are sort of using that knowledge to sort of almost design the websites as well, and figure out like what's the best way to make this as SEO effective as possible, but still like still look nice and still sort of meet what they wanted to meet, essentially.
Yeah, it's that fine balance, isn't it, I suppose, between having the aesthetic that aligns with your branding on your website and then the target keywords as well, and trying to like bring that all together. In terms of tools or, like tools that can support people with their websites or with the SEO, is there anything, Khadija, just off the top of your head that you sort of recommend as like a go-to tool for 2025? You're like, you need to be using this if you're thinking about SEO, for example, on your site.
Yeah, so there's what's great about, because there's such a focus on SEO and how to help your website rank higher. There's a lot of tools out there. A lot of them can be free as well, so it's not like if you've got like a tight budget to work with, you've got some really great free tools out there. One of them, especially for things like technical SEO, where we look at sort of performance. GT metrics is a really good one to go for, really easy to use. Just simply you type in the name of your domain of your website, and then it'll give you a big sort of list of like improvements to make. It'll show you sort of how long certain elements of your website are taking to load, what you can do to optimize, the speed of that. It makes really good suggestions as well. So definitely for technical SEO, if you want to monitor your performance, GT metrics is the way to go. Technical SEO and performance and things like that are something that Google really do look at. Anything that's slow to load, anything that's gonna take too long to load on mobile, especially, you want to make sure that you're hitting that target basically, so that people aren't clicking off your website. People are very impatient these days, so they want everything to load quickly and as fast as possible, which is fair enough. So yeah, definitely for performance side of things, I think GT metrics is great. For on-page SEO, looking at the actual structure of your website, I would say maybe even SEO ability, really easy to use SEO checker. So you'll just, again, just simply paste in the link, page by page, and you'll just see almost like it gives a sort of like checklist basically of things that you are missing and things you're doing well. So for example, if your heading structure isn't as organized as it should be, if you're missing heading types, for example, if you're missing a heading 1 type, things like that, it lists really clearly actually like what you could be doing to improve that. And then it's just a simple matter of just going through that list and see what improvements that you can make. And yeah, everything's sort of explained, nice and clearly basically, which is great for, people who are maybe not being handheld in terms of like through the process of how to optimize the website. If they're doing it by themselves, they don't have a background on it, it's really important that you find tools that kind of help you explain things a bit better and, just help you with the instructions on how to do everything, things like that.
A tool like that, it can almost sort of teach you as well what
Yeah.
to have in mind, I suppose, as you go.
Yeah.
I would always recommend use like rank math in terms of as you're creating
yeah,
blogs,
definitely.
say, in the back end of WordPress, that kind of, like you just described there, that kind of checklist format is
Checklist, yeah.
so helpful, because then also the dopamine of that little green tick every time you like
You see a score growing up, you're like, yes.
you're like, you mentioned there site speed and the importance of that for, especially for mobile, I suppose, because that's how we all navigate the world now. It's through
Yeah,
our
definitely.
mobile. Amy, in terms of like technically, maybe this is quite a hard thing to explain, but how do you technically make sure that your site speed is optimized? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways you can do it, and there's a lot of different sort of things that you need to check. And there's sort of 4 core metrics that Google would use to sort of um, rank your site speed and rank your performance. So without getting into what they all are, they're essentially to do with the loading time of the things on your page and what you can do then to reduce that. So things like having optimized images, which means, reducing the file size of your images before you put them on the website, using system fonts rather than getting a font off, say, Google Fonts and loading that in from Google. That's just adding to your server payload, which slows the website down. Well, there's 4 metrics, so that was sort of more like recommendations on what you can do, but there's 4 metrics. So the 4 metrics that are sort of the technical aspects of what Google would check are first contentful paint, large contentful paint, time to interactive, and cumulative layout shift. So essentially what they all mean is like first contentful paint is how long it takes for the very first thing on your website to load. So it's the first time that a user gets an indication that the website is actually loading something and it's not just a blank page. Your time to interactive is the time it takes for the website to actually become usable. So, the user can go and click a button or fill in a form, stuff like that. Your cumulative layout shift then is, whenever if you're on a website on your phone, say, and it starts jumping around because there's like an advert loading or a picture loading that's really annoying, that's your cumulative layout shift. So essentially you want to avoid that. And that's something that Google looks at and sort of ranks. So, if that is high, that means that obviously things are going to be jumping around, which you want to avoid. So there's just so many different things we can do to sort of bring that down. And one of the sort of main things you can do is to use caching. So we work primarily with WordPress websites, and we would use WP Rocket, which is a really, really useful plugin. There's other ones out there available as well. Like there's Lightspeed Cache is one that I had used before. WP Optimize is another one. So there's plenty of useful resources. Fairly simple to set up, especially if you're not experienced as well. And it does just really help in sort of speeding things up without you needing to do too much of the technical work in the background.
I learned so much there. That's really interesting. I think that that's the key, isn't it? That, we've all kind of highlighted so far, as in it's finding the tools that can help make it a bit simpler, especially for business owners, people who are running their own websites and trying to keep it tick over in the background, and getting that kind of marrying together of the on-page content and then things like the load time, meta descriptions, things like that. Something I find from a content point of view, I suppose, is the sort of lack of integration of keywords and doing that kind of ongoing optimization of target keywords. It's always, I use this in every SEO session. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're not just shoving in like keywords and then that's it. It's the ongoing kind of updating of them and trying to target specific keywords. And when we think about the amount of content really that someone should be having on a site, I always use the example, those like recipe blogs that we all use, where we Google how to cook a Victoria sponge and then the first recipe we see, this big long page of content with a button where you can jump to the recipe, and that's how that recipe is then ranked above the other recipes for Victoria Sponge because it's so rich in content. Khadija, what challenges do you see for people in terms of, and do you see any challenges on websites of clients that you work with finding that balance between the aesthetic and user experience of pages and then balancing having enough written content on the page as well?
Yeah, so I think for a long time there was sort of an emphasis on, I guess, more design and the desired sort of design of someone's website. The people like to sort of like the minimal kind of approach, clean lines, white space, to look a bit more professional. And those are like, those are aesthetically pleasing websites, but you lack a lot of opportunity for on-page SEO. From a designer's perspective, or like for people who are looking for, more of like a design perspective on their website, it's like, so a website is their first interaction for like a potential customer will have with your business. So anything that's unappealing, confusing navigation, visual inconsistency, things like that can really put people off. At the same time, if you're overwhelming users with too much text, you can sort of make their website feel a bit more cluttered and difficult to navigate. So in that sense, yeah, you have to kind of be careful with how much content you're putting on the website, because it's fair enough if it's helping your website rank. If people are going onto your website and then clicking off it, that's no good either.
Yeah.
From the perspective of sort of on-page SEO, a design-heavy focus will lead to less emphasis on your content. And even if your website is, visually stunning, if there's not enough valuable information for users to kind of go on to understand about your business, about your services, again, they're just not going to stay on your website. They're not going to, you won't have any leads to be generated, basically. So on one hand, like, content is king, but you can't let it sort of overshadow like the look of your website. And yeah, but in recent sort of times, like, people are focusing more and more on how they can get their website to rank, and they're accepting, actually, no, we need to put a bit more content on it. I think from both perspectives, user experience is key, and for the most part, there are a lot of things that are that go hand in hand in terms of the design of a website and how well SEO should be. Like, as we said about load times, for example, both sides understand that fast loading websites are key to ensuring that your website has, what we call a low bounce rate. And a lot of the practices that, some designers and developers will do for their website, like compressing images, minifying code, also is what goes aligns with good sort of SEO practices as well. So there's a lot of ways it kind of goes hand in hand. I think at the end of the day, if you focus on what your user experience should be like and how you want your users to behave on your website, you can sort of find a balance there that way.
You mentioned there code, and my first question, thinking about that would be for Amy, is there anything people can do with code and schema on their website to, like, gently encourage it to rank higher? What's your sort of perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is actually something called Schema Markup or structured data, which is used by the search engines primarily. I think it's a Google thing. It might be a whole wide thing, not too sure. So it's like a set of tags that you can add to your pages on your website, and they basically tell the browser or tell the search engine, what the page is about. So it gives it context, and that then helps Google or whatever search engine you're using to sort of then rank it and index it and tell people what they're looking at. So there's so many different kinds. There is like organizational schema, which would be like telling people about what your business name, your logo, and like where you're based. There's local business schema, which would be things like opening hours, your address, contact details, things like that. Product schema would be a big one, and I think it's probably the one people would be most familiar with. It's essentially like, you're adding your data about your product, so pricing, images, name, description of the one. But the way that it sort of presents itself is if you are looking for something, I don't know, say you wanted to buy a new bag, and you type into Google red bag, and then you get results up at the top ahead of search results, and it's pictures or links to actual shop products that you can buy through Google. So they are using structured data or schema markup, or using the product schema markup to essentially tell Google that I'm selling a bag, and people will then see that before they'll see the results. So it's really useful and a really good thing to sort of make use of to boost yourself and to get yourself higher up the rankings than websites that aren't doing it, essentially.
Really interested. Do you think that is the on-page content just as important as schema markup, or are they equally important? What's your sort of thoughts there?
I would say equally important. They're two very different entities in that, you know, they're both different ways to drive traffic to your website. So with your on-page SEO, you're driving people through the website organically, whereas with the structured data, you're driving people directly to the products. So two different ways to do it, equally as important to each other is how I would.
The thing as well, I don't think any of us ever have or ever will work with a business or a client who isn't trying to find organic, free ways to drive traffic and drive sales. It's really interesting as well. I think at the minute we're seeing this kind of huge, I would say potentially uproar amongst the marketing community when it comes to Google ads, and the increase in the cost of running Google ads for AdWords and bidding on AdWords. Whereas the SEO and the on-page optimization is the way to try to do that in an organic, free way, which we're all about that. We're all about the sustainable marketing. In terms of then, something I think would be really interesting for us to maybe look at would be, maybe we could share, I'm going to share the ProfileTree website here, and we could sort of use it as a basis to go through kind of on-page optimization in terms of design and SEO content. So as we scroll down here through our main homepage, we have a good amount of written text, obviously, and then we've got videos embedded into the pages, as well as then little drop down stories and buttons where we can click through and go to other places.
Yeah.
In terms of tips or recommendations, what would you suggest? If you were looking at this page and you were going to audit it, and we're going to audit ourselves because then that means we're not auditing anyone else. What's your sort of thoughts? Just so that we can maybe give some recommendations to people, essentially, I suppose, on what they should be looking for when they're designing or building a site.
So I think one of the most, or at least the common issue that I would see on a lot of people's website is actually, written content. So you can see on our website, we've got a good amount of written content, and it's optimized written content. So before you go into sort of writing content and, uploading onto your website, a bit of research into what keywords that you want to be ranking for, what keywords you're already maybe ranking for, what keywords you could be ranking for. A bit of research into that will just help you a lot into writing content on uploading onto your website. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is to actually write down the content. And I think that's where AI has been making waves, because it really does help a lot of people. Simply just even giving them a prompt to say, okay, here's kind of what I'm trying to say. Here's some keywords. Can you maybe optimize it for me? And things like that. It saves people a lot of time, but you're still getting good quality content out of it. So I'd say the amount of content, but then also the quality of that content is really, really important. Even
sorry, Katie, should have cut you off there. What tools would you recommend for keyword research? What do you think, in your opinion?
So there's some pretty good ones. Some of them are paid, but they do have sort of a free version that you can work with. For example, Ahrefs. So you're kind of limited in how much you can use it, but you can still use it to get a decent amount of to understand a decent amount of keywords that your site is currently ranking for. It works similar to how some of the SEO tools and performance tools that we talked about work. So you'll type in the link, and then it'll give you sort of a good kind of report over words that your website is currently ranking for and what you could be ranking for. It'll give you a sort of indication on what it's called, but it's the competition around that keyword. So how difficult it would be to kind of rank for that keyword. Sometimes it's a matter of time, just to get the content on there, but then also just let Google crawl it and let people to click on it. But a lot of the times, keywords that are difficult to get, they're not being ranked by other companies, although it might be easier for you if you start to optimize your content based around that keyword. You've now got a keyword that has a low competition, but you're getting in organic traffic through that way. So Ahrefs is a good one. SEMrush is also a really good one. I think that is paid though. I'm not sure if they do a full a free trial, but again, it does the same thing really. It gives you type in your domain, and then it just gives you a good analysis on words that you could be ranking for and words that you're currently ranking for. You might find there are some words that you didn't know that you're ranking for, but it's a good way for you to kind of then jump on that opportunity and add more content onto your website based on that keyword. So definitely content would be good, but then just making sure that content is actually optimized for the keywords that you want to rank for.
And that's all such great recommendations, because as well what you're talking about there, as well as the having the on-page content, the keywords, having it optimized and written. And you mentioned there how AI can sort of help that in terms of like using, kind of the Rhodes framework, I suppose, to help with prompts, so prompt engineering smartly to make sure you're using the keywords. Just off that, Amy, do you have any sort of thoughts on how does Google view AI content? Because we're seeing this real increase in using AI for content marketing to help us, to make it easier. Does the Google algorithm treat AI written content any differently to human written content, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. The shift that has happened in sort of the past year and a half, with sort of AI getting so prevalent. And before April 2023, Google said their guidelines were that any automatically generated content was going to be marked down. They were going to downgrade you if they recognize that, because automatically generated content was typically always just spammy content, which is not helpful to users, and they don't want that. They don't want to give that to their users. So as of April 2023, then, whenever sort of AI was obviously taken off and we're not coming back from it now, they actually changed their guidelines to say that it's okay to use AI if you're using it in a way that is still generating content that is helpful for your user and has your end users in mind. So if you're using AI to, again, create like spammy content or stuff that, is just obviously to get loads of keywords in and manipulate your search engine rankings, then they will still downgrade you for that. But they have said that they're okay if you're using AI if it is beneficial to the end user, which I think it's a really good take from Google. Typically they, developers have sort of a bit of a beef with Google because they are always changing their rules, and they're obviously people first or user first, which then makes our lives sometimes a little more difficult. But it's interesting to see that they're taking this route. It's obviously the good thing to do. And I think that AI can be really useful, and people obviously are seeing that. And sometimes it can actually be, as sort of Kadisha was saying, like better content than what someone could write themselves. So that's sort of where Google has shifted their focus to. It's to using AI and such tools to create helpful content.
Almost put in like your own, using the AI to help with the ideas generation, the contents list, maybe write in a first draft, using the AI to help you include the keywords, but then putting your own perspective onto the content and avoiding copy and paste. I don't know how many times I can reiterate that. Avoid copy and paste, because then Google will penalize it, and what's the point of going to all that effort to generate the prompt, to do the keyword research, to get the content written, to then just copy and paste and potentially then be penalized for it. It's better to take the time, to
customize. Always rework it.
Yeah, always. I like that description that you used, that developers have beef with Google. Got beef with Google.
Developers have beef with everyone.
Everyone in the world. In terms of that, sorry, I got sidetracked there because I was screen sharing and showing the website, and then I got really excited by what Google thinks about AI content. So we were going through, Khadija, and we were talking about having enough written content on the page, and if we sort of skim over our website, not to blow our own trumpet or anything, but you've got these really like nice bite-size chunks of content. It's not 2,000 words of content just on one page. And a nice mix of kind of media as
Yeah,
well.
different media to kind of break it up a bit. And that's, I mean, even if you weren't looking at it from a design perspective, from a user's perspective, like no one's going to read like a big thing of content just in the screen. So that's kind of where the design kind of comes into play, where you want to break it up with images, videos, things like that to make it easier to read. But then that also goes hand in hand with on-page SEO, because Google like to see the use of media and things like that, because then it understands actually they've used this media and it's helping breaking up the content. So again, it's just another example of how they can go, sort of hand in hand. So yeah, I think we've done that pretty well. We've got a good mix of both.
We do say so ourselves. If we're talking about analytics in the back end of a website, what analytics do you think are an indication, that the on-page SEO is strong? Should people be looking at their bounce rate, for example, or is it the average engagement time on a page? What's your sort of thoughts there?
Yeah, I think different analytics will tell you different things, and I would say they're all kind of important. So if you're seeing a high bounce rate, then okay, there's something on your site that's kind of confusing the user or overwhelming the user. In a lot of cases, it's maybe not a clear navigation. If you've got too many items in your navigation, some people have like 3 different navigations, so they'll have like a top bar and a bottom bar and like this middle bar, and you're like, okay. If there's no like direct kind of call to action or ways to kind of guide your user through your website. So for example, like a clear structure, like you've got your homepage, you've got a bit about yourself, a bit about your services. There's no like clear structure like that. You've got kind of content everywhere. So then there's something wrong with your website structure. Things like people not spending enough time on your website. So like the session length. Then if that's quite low, then there's maybe the content that's on your website maybe isn't engaging enough. And that could be maybe there's too much written content. I always try and encourage clients to use video content. I think video content is a really good way to keep people on your site for longer and have Google track that people are on that page for longer. Because just the easier form of media to consume, really, like you're just watching people explain something to you. I think I'd rather watch a video than read about somebody's business. So so different analytics will tell you different things. I think it's important to kind of obviously take into account what they're saying, but also to keep checking your analytics. Don't just check it once and okay, I've got a high bounce rate, I'll fix my nav, whatever. You keep coming back to it, keep seeing how your users are engaging onto your website. And especially because if you are having a website where you are updating the content continuously, then those metrics will change, and you should always see sort of like, okay, low bounce rate and high engagement, things like that. And yeah, just keeping an eye on all your analytics and just understanding what those analytics are trying to say about your website.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that kind of ongoing approach, not just watching the analytics and because one thing is low, then going, I'm going to change all of this. It's you almost have to manage those analytics together and compare them. The same as with the keyword research. If we've got a keyword that has a high volume and really high SEO difficulty, then we're being strategic and okay, is there another keyword we could target instead? It's the same thing with analytics. If you were making recommendations, Amy, to a client to start on the journey of kind of SEO optimizing their website, what would be your like kind of main recommendations to start off with? Like maybe like 3 or 4 things that you'd say this is absolutely where you need to begin that journey to look at where you're at the moment.
Probably the top ones I would say are something Khadija mentioned earlier, actually, about headings and your heading structure. So there's the structure you need to follow from H1 to H6, and that's essentially just how Google wants you to, like lay out your page almost like a document. So your heading 1 is going to be your biggest heading, most important one, and then you could go on down the rankings that way. A lot of the time I find websites, if they're performing poorly, they don't have their headings quite right. So the issue is, they're maybe missing their H1, so there's no context to the users or to Google what page is actually about, and therefore Google's not going to index that because it's not helpful content to its users. So number 1 would probably be get your headings in order and make sure that you're using the correct tags for them. Another big one is your images and alt text. So can't really stress enough how important alt text is for any number of reasons. There's your SEO and there's your accessibility are sort of the two big things. For SEO, you want to be describing what the picture is. A lot of times I see people with alt text and they'll describe, it's like it's a picture of, we'll say, people on a beach, and they'll say, our team at the beach, but that's not really describing what's in the picture. You need to say like, oh, there's two people, one's wearing a red t-shirt, one's wearing blue jeans, they're on a beach. It needs to describe what's actually in the picture and detail, yeah. And that is really important, especially for accessibility. I know we're sort of talking more about SEO, but for accessibility, people who are using maybe screen readers and stuff but can't actually see the picture, for them to have that context is really important as well. For SEO as well, and obviously it's going to be reading the alt text, and if you're adding context through your alt tags, then that's just going to help Google have a little bit more context as to what is on your page, and it'll just help them index you that little bit better. I suppose then just it is as well the content, as we've sort of already discussed, like, so your keywords and making sure your content is all sort of up to speed. And then the other thing is sort of going back to your performance. So your performance does also sort of affect your rankings, as Google doesn't want to present users with websites that are performing poorly. So if your website isn't technically up to speed and it's quite slow or it's not really working as expected, that can harm you as well in your search engine rankings.
Something that I see sometimes can be almost maybe it's correct to say a frustration or confusion as to why one website might rank higher than another in terms of SEO. And obviously there's so many things that impact that, like domain age and the content on the site and all those technical things as well that we've touched base on. I think it's just so important for anyone that is, selling anything online through their website or trying to market themselves through their website to remember that anyone that offers something similar to you or your business is a competitor. If they have a presence online, they're a competitor. So SEO is one of those things, I think, that it's a lot of work. It takes a long time, but the rewards are so important because you're not just competing against, say, a bakery. If you're a bakery, another bakery down the road, you're competing on every bakery that exists online. And if you sell your products online, that's a potential customer, that you're losing if someone else's SEO is better or their website is slightly better than yours. With that being said, there are those things that are essentially somewhat out of control of the business owner. If, say, another website has just existed longer or, has an older kind of presence. If you were working with someone, and this is open to the floor, if you were working with someone and they were saying to you, my competitor is continually outranking me and I'm creating SEO optimized content for my site is sort of the best it can be in terms of loading time and speed and those sorts of things, what recommendations might you make to that person? Maybe Khadija, do you want to start us off? And the big question, and it's a hard one.
Yeah, I think so the first thing that you would probably would need to look at is just sort of your SEO strategy, I guess. Again, using some of the tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs, you can sort of see like where they're kind of ranking for in terms of keyword as well. And just trying to maximize on keywords that maybe are difficult to get in terms of content, but like you can always, if they're not being ranked currently by your competitor, really trying to maximizing on keywords that they're not ranking for currently. This might be in the form of blogs. If it makes sense for you to add a blog for your website, I would always say that blogs are a really good way to continuously add new content onto your website. Before AI was a bit mainstream, it was a little bit difficult to get clients on board with that because they're like, oh, how am I going to write a blog every single week?
I don't have time for social media. How can I do a blog?
So it was a bit harder back then, but now it's a lot easier because, again, as long as you have like a relevant topic and a relevant keyword that you can maximize on, giving a nice sort of prompt to whatever it is, ChatGPT or Perplexity, to help you write a blog, or even just optimizing a blog that you may write yourself, but asking it to optimize it for keywords, for content length, things like that will just help you a lot more in terms of getting more keywords for you to rank in. At the end of the day, you want to stick to your plan as much as possible. Like, don't be so put off, like, oh, my competitor is still, ranking higher than me. A lot of SEO, unfortunately, is time, like just letting Google crawl your site, letting people come onto your site. Keep watching the analytics, keep making sure that your website is up to date in terms of content, but also just making sure like the performance and all of that is still working okay. But always just kind of look for new opportunities to maximize on maybe keywords that your competitors aren't using. If there's maybe even certain things that your competitors aren't offering on their websites, for example, if there's no sort of clear inquiry where they can sort of, contact the business themselves, you can make that a bit clearer for your own website, making sure your website is clear for users if they wanted to make an inquiry, if they wanted to give a call, things like that. Yeah, just sort of keep at it basically, but always just look for new content. I would say using tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush would be a really good way, and also just making sure there's some form of analytics like Google Analytics, because that will tell you best really like why your users are maybe not clicking onto your website, or onto your website but maybe just not staying long enough, what pages are the most popular, what pages aren't more popular. So have a good look at your sort of analytics and see what you can sort of fix in that sense, and what opportunities you might still have in order to help your ranking on search engines.
And keeping at it, I think that's keep on keeping on, don't let it, dishearten you. What is anything, Amy, you would sort of add to what Khadija said, or
I suppose another tool, Sarah's touching Google Analytics, but there's Google Search Console as well, can be really valuable for figuring out how people are getting to your website, what they're actually looking for.
Yeah.
And again, it's just sort of it's just another sort of tool to have in your kit to see what keywords maybe you should be using that maybe you're not using, or if there's anything like you saw, if you're writing a blog, like maybe you should write a blog about a specific search query that people are looking for a lot. So it's another really useful one to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well, that kind of not feeling that pressure, especially if you're comparing yourself to someone else that you're trying to sort of compete against, not feeling that pressure to, okay, we just need to start adding loads and loads and loads and loads of content to the site.
You definitely don't want to do that.
Now let's optimize what we already have in the strategy, like you said, Khadija. So taking a tool like Google Search Console, check through the pages, check the queries that the pages are ranking for, use that keyword data and AI to then help you optimize, expand the content on the page, adding in FAQs, video. That's why having YouTube videos, like you mentioned there as well, embedded is so good, increasing the watch time and sort of marrying all those things together, the technical and the on-page and the design, so that your website is just the best it can be, and knowing that it takes a wee bit of time to get there. It's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately.
I would say a lot as well. Sometimes what I see with clients is their website might not be ranking high, but they've got a good social media following. And sometimes when it comes to on analytics, you can also see like how people are coming onto your website. And a lot of times social media is one of like the higher referrers basically. So even working on your social media to kind of bring that social media audience onto your website. So like, for example, if you do post a new blog on your website, maybe posting about it on your Facebook or your Twitter, X, and just saying, look, I've got a new blog out, here's this, or any kind of latest updates about yourself. Always kind of link back into your website to kind of move that traffic over onto your website as well. So that's been quite helpful for a lot of clients as well.
Yeah, those good backlinks. Get those
yes.
backlinks. And also, I suppose, PR opportunities where you can, have clients that I've worked with who, they might say to me, I don't know how, they've never had an SEO strategy, and they say, I don't know how my SEO is good on my site. I've not tried to target these keywords, but they have these really rich, amazing backlinks from other, really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not influential, that's the wrong word. I think I'm thinking like credible, that's the word.
Credible, yeah.
Other credible sites, or resources that if they're backlinking then to their site and they have blog content, which then links out to all their product pages, then that's gold, So it's finding those opportunities as well, and and taking your time with it. But I think we've sort of outlined some really great tools as well that people can use, and some tips and recommendations. And I think, unless anyone has anything else to add, maybe we've touched all bases for today. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I've definitely learned a lot from both of you actually. So yeah, this is good.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for your time.